I'm Claire Lawson. I'm 39 years old, and I've spent the last 20 years of my life serving as a lieutenant colonel in the United States Air Force. I've flown through sandstorms that could tear skin from bone. I've stood on airfields in the dead of night watching comrades board planes some never came back. And through it all, I believed the battlefield was the most dangerous place a person could ever be. I was wrong. Because the real betrayal didn't come from the enemy on the other side of the wire. It came from the people I called family. I was deployed overseas, my final mission before early retirement. I still remember the heat on my skin, the weight of my gear, the distant rumble of rotors. It was just another day in the desert, until I opened my email. The subject line read, "Let's be adults about this." It was from my sister Ivy. The message was 2 sentences long. "We've moved into the house. Since you won't be needing it anymore, we're taking care of it." That was it. No explanation, no warning. I felt the blood drain from my face. I opened my bank app. My joint accounts emptied, my savings gone. The house I bought after years of sacrifice stolen. I sat on the edge of my cot, surrounded by the dust and sweat of deployment, and I typed one word back. Understood. That was the moment everything inside me shifted. Most people, I think, would have panicked, cried, screamed, called home. I didn't. I took a breath. I steadied my hands, and I began to plan. My family had called me a failure for years. Ivy once told me I wasted my life playing soldier instead of building something real. My cousin Mark said I should quit chasing medals and come back to the real world. Even my own mother, whom I had supported through every illness and hardship, once asked me why I didn't just find a normal job. While I was overseas serving, they saw an opportunity. They emptied my account. They took over my house. They thought I was too far away, too powerless to stop them. They were wrong. I don't start wars. But I do finish them. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to beg for what was mine. I understood something most people never learn. When people show you who they really are, believe them. And when people take everything from you, you don't get even by screaming. You get even by surviving, by staying calm, by being smarter. I wasn't just going to take my life back. I was going to take back something much bigger: my dignity, my peace, and my right to decide who I let into my life. The day they realized what I had done, the day they realized it was already too late, that was the day I knew I had won. Because sometimes revenge isn't loud. It doesn't come with fireworks or fists. Sometimes revenge is quiet, silent, patient. And when it strikes, no one sees it coming. That's my story. And I'm going to tell you everything. How it started, how it broke me, and how I rebuilt everything they tried to steal. Because if it happened to me, it could happen to anyone. And maybe if you're listening, it won't happen to you. Let's begin. They say hindsight is 20/20, but looking back now, the signs were always there. I just didn't want to see them. 6 months before my deployment, things started to shift. It wasn't dramatic, no screaming, no slam doors. It was quieter than that. Subtle, like a slow leak in the hull of a ship. By the time you notice, you're already sinking. Ivy, my younger sister, had always been the life of every room. She was sharp, ambitious in her own way, though we couldn't have been more different. I was military, she was hospitality. I lived by structure, she thrived in chaos. But somewhere along the way, she stopped calling as often. Our Sunday phone chats shortened. She was always too busy or too tired. I told myself it was normal. Life gets in the way. But then came Mark, my cousin on my mother's side. Mark and I were never close. He floated from one job to another, always chasing something fast. Money, fast cars, faster exits. Out of nowhere, he started calling me too, telling me how he was getting into real estate and could help manage things while I was away. His words were smooth, too smooth. "I just want to help you, Claire," he said once over the phone. "Families should stick together." I remember sitting in my living room that night, staring at the fireplace, and something inside me whispered, "This doesn't feel right." Even my mother, who'd always been my quiet anchor, seemed different, distant. I flew down to see her before deployment like I always did. She made her famous peach cobbler, but her eyes were somewhere else. She asked about my tour out of politeness, but the warmth wasn't there. She didn't ask when I'd be back. She didn't ask if I was scared. When I left, her hug felt unfinished. I told myself I was imagining things. stress, pre-deployment jitters. But my gut knew better. In the military, your instincts keep you alive. You learn to read micro-expressions, to sense the undercurrents of danger before the first shot is fired. And for the first time, I felt that same quiet alarm inside my own home. That's when I began to prepare. I wasn't reckless about it. No accusations, no drama, just quiet moves. One by one, I gathered the documents that mattered: my birth certificate, the deed to my house, the small collection of jewelry my grandmother left me, my military pension records. I rented a small storage unit 20 miles outside town. I didn't even tell my closest friends. I told myself it was for safekeeping, just in case. I also opened a separate bank account in a different state. Not for everything, just enough. Enough that if something went wrong, I wouldn't be starting from zero. And then there was the camera. It was a gift from an old friend, military grade, but small. Discreet. I installed it in my house without telling anyone. I didn't think I'd ever need it, but something told me to do it anyway. It's funny how you can live your entire life trusting the people around you, but it takes just one quiet moment, one still evening when the air feels off for everything to shift. The night before I deployed, Ivy came to the airport. She smiled, hugged me, told me to stay safe. But her eyes didn't match her words. They were dry, cold. And for the first time, I let myself consider the thought I'd been pushing away for months. What if they're not waiting for me to come home? What if they're waiting for me to leave? I stood at the terminal window that night, watching the plane lights blink against the dark sky, and I felt it deep in my bones. Something was coming. I just didn't know how bad it would be, or how far I'd have to go to survive it. I've always believed that the most dangerous threats are the ones you never see coming. That's why long before I stepped onto the plane that would take me to my final deployment, I started preparing for a battle I couldn't yet define. It began with the documents. Late one evening, after another awkward dinner with Ivy and Mark, I unlocked the old chest in my bedroom, the one I hadn't opened in years. Inside were pieces of my life that most people wouldn't think twice about: my birth certificate, the original deed to my house insurance papers, military discharge records, the will my parents left behind. I sat there cross-legged on the floor, handling each document with deliberate care. My fingertips traced the edges like they were maps of my history. I remember thinking, it's probably nothing. But I also remembered every briefing I'd ever sat through about worst-case scenarios. In the military, you never assume you're safe, just because things look calm on the surface. You prepare for the storm, even on sunny days. I rented a storage unit under a different name, small, windowless, located in an industrial park no one in my family knew existed. I placed every important document inside a locked, fireproof box. Next came the valuables, things that didn't hold monetary value but carried the weight of memory. My father's watch, the locket my mother gave me on my commissioning day, the bronze star I'd earned in Kabul. One by one, I moved them out of my house, quietly, without explanation. I also met with a financial advisor, someone outside my usual circle. I started shifting small amounts into a separate account at a credit union that didn't even have branches in my state. Not enough for anyone to notice right away, but enough that if the bottom fell out, I wouldn't be standing on nothing. And then there was the surveillance. I'd never considered cameras before. My neighborhood was safe, my house modest. But something about Ivy's sudden distance, Mark's uncharacteristic helpfulness, and my mother's unsettling detachment pressed on me like a weight I couldn't shake. So I installed them. 2 outside, 1 inside. All motion activated, all discreet. The kind that uploaded footage to a cloud I alone could access. I told myself it was paranoia, that I was letting years of deployments and distrust get the better of me. I told myself I was being ridiculous. And yet, I didn't stop, because somewhere deep down, I knew. There was a moment, just a flicker of doubt that told me everything I needed to know. Ivy stopped using the front door. She started coming through the back entrance, as if avoiding the camera I'd installed by the driveway. Mark began asking about the title to the house in offhand ways. Who holds the mortgage again, as if he wasn't really making conversation. Even my mother, my own mother, once asked me over tea whether my military pension could be transferred if something happened to me. Each moment on its own seemed harmless. Together, they formed a pattern, and patterns are never accidental. I remember one particular night just before I left. I was standing in the doorway of my bedroom, suitcase half packed on the bed, and I caught my reflection in the mirror. For the first time, I didn't recognize the woman staring back. She looked tired. Not from deployment preparations, but from something heavier, something personal, something deeper than sand and bullets, and the constant hum of military machinery. That night I sat at my kitchen table long after midnight, sipping tea gone cold, and I made myself a quiet promise I would go. I would serve. I would do my duty as I always had. But I would also protect myself. Not from bombs or bullets, but from betrayal. I still held on to hope, though. Somewhere inside, I still believed I might be wrong. That when I came home, the house would still feel like home. That the people I loved would still be the people I trusted. I wanted to believe that. I really did. But as I locked the storage unit for the last time, as I slid the final document into place, I couldn't ignore the whisper in the back of my mind, prepare for the worst, even if it's the people you love. I still remember the exact moment the world I knew collapsed. It was 2 weeks into my deployment. The air smelled like diesel and dust. The sun was a pale smear behind layers of smoke. I was sitting in the mess hall, half listening to 2 younger soldiers argue over football scores, when my phone buzzed. I pulled it out expecting a message from a friend or some meaningless notification. But instead it was from the bank, a transaction alert. I frowned, then another, and another. I tapped the app open and felt my stomach knot. Withdrawal $4,000. Withdrawal $200. Withdrawal $88 $500. It took me a moment to process what I was seeing. The numbers didn't make sense. I checked my balance. The joint account I'd built over years. It was nearly empty. Just a few dollars remained. The savings account was gone too, completely drained. I froze. It felt surreal, like my brain refused to connect the pieces. The noise of the mess hall faded into a dull hum. My hands tightened around the phone. I refreshed the screen. Same numbers, same emptiness. That's when I knew something was very, very wrong. I didn't make a scene. I didn't even blink. I finished my coffee because that's what I do when the ground shifts beneath me. I act like it doesn't. I act like I'm still in control, even when I know I'm not. That night I waited until my shift was over. I lay on my cot motionless until the barracks lights dimmed and the sound of breathing filled the room. And then I pulled out my laptop. I logged into the home security system. My heart thudded, not fast, not panicked, just heavy. Like it already knew what I was about to find. The screen came to life. A grainy image loaded slowly. My living room. Only it wasn't mine anymore. A man I didn't recognize was sitting on my couch. He was drinking from a coffee mug, my mug, the one with the Air Force emblem. He was barefoot, relaxed, wearing my Seahawks sweatshirt. I blinked, thinking maybe I was hallucinating from exhaustion. But then he got up, casually picked up my dog's leash from the hallway, and let my Labrador out the back door like it was just another morning. And then she appeared. Ivy, laughing. Laughing in the kitchen. I had remodeled myself. She opened the fridge, pulled out a bottle of wine, poured 2 glasses. She handed one to the man. They toasted. They drank. I didn't move. I barely breathed. The footage kept rolling, mundane, domestic, horrifying. I fast-forwarded. More of the same. The man came and went freely. The dog followed him around. My dog, my house, my life. I shut the laptop. I sat in the dark, staring at nothing. And that's when something inside me shifted. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even heartbreak. It was something colder, something harder, like steel locking into place after years of erosion. I understood in that moment that I wasn't coming home to the life I'd left behind. That life was gone, taken, stolen by the people I had loved the most. And yet somehow I was calm. I pulled out my notebook and started to write. I made a list: contact James, my old Army buddy turned attorney, review the mortgage documents, check VA loan terms, call the bank's fraud department, secure my pension accounts, one step at a time. I didn't need to panic. I didn't need to beg. I needed to outthink them. Because in war, you don't win by being louder. You win by being smarter, by striking when they least expect it, by turning their overconfidence into the very thing that destroys them. I closed the notebook, closed the laptop, rolled onto my side, and for the first time since receiving that email, I slept. Not because everything was okay, but because I had a plan. The next morning, I didn't waste time. Before sunrise, I made my way to the small phone center on base, the only place where I could make a secure call without attracting attention. My hands were steady as I dialed James's number. He picked up on the third ring. Claire. His voice was groggy but alert. What's wrong? I kept it simple. I need legal help. Discreet. Urgent. There was a pause and then say no more. Tell me everything. I told him about the emptied accounts, the strangers in my house, the email from Ivy. I kept my voice even clinical. I left out how it felt because what did that matter now? Facts first, emotions later. By the time we hung up, James had agreed to start digging immediately. Property records, financial statements, anything he could find. 2 days later, his email came through. I read it 3 times before the words truly registered. My house, technically still in my name, had been refinanced 3 months earlier. A new loan, $330,000, pulled directly against the equity I had built over the past decade. But that wasn't the worst part. My signature was on the documents, only it wasn't mine. James had attached the scanned copies. I opened them, my breath catching in my throat. The handwriting was close enough that a casual observer wouldn't notice, but I knew my own pen strokes. The middle initial was wrong. The loops were too sharp. The pressure of the ink inconsistent with my writing style. It was a forgery, a bad one, but good enough to pass. The name listed alongside mine on the co-applicant line made my stomach twist. Mark. Not Ivy. Mark. I stared at the screen numb. The cousin who called me sister in family photos. The cousin who offered to look after things while I was away. The same cousin who 2 years earlier had tried to borrow money for a failed business scheme. Back then I said no. I thought it was over. Apparently, it wasn't. I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. My hands felt cold, detached. But the worst blow hadn't landed yet. James's second email arrived hours later. Short, simple, brutal. Claire. It's not just Mark. Ivy co-signed on the account withdrawals. She's listed on multiple authorizations. I'm sorry, I sat perfectly still. My heart strangely quiet in my chest. Ivy, my sister, the girl I used to braid hair for, the one I used to protect from bullies on the school bus, the person who held my hand when we buried our father. She wasn't just going along with Mark's plan. She was part of it. I don't remember how long I sat there. The desert outside the window stretched into endless gold, the hum of machinery distant and dull. Somewhere men and women were laughing over cards. Someone was playing music. Life went on. But mine had stopped. Betrayal is a funny thing. It doesn't hit all at once. It sinks in slowly, layer by layer, until you can't breathe under the weight of it. I thought I was ready. I thought I'd prepared. But nothing prepares you for the moment you realize the people you would have died for wouldn't lift a finger to save you. Ivy, Mark. Their names felt foreign now, hollow. And yet even then, even in the darkest corner of that moment, a part of me whispered, stay calm. Because this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. James didn't waste time. 2 days after I learned about the forged mortgage, I received another secure call. His voice was sharper this time, carrying the kind of tension I'd heard only in combat zones. Claire, he said, we have a name. Vincent Blake. The name meant nothing to me at first. I repeated it under my breath. Who is he? Ex-military contractor, James said. Used to work logistics for a private defense company. Blacklisted 5 years ago for ethics violations, fraud, bribery, falsified reports. He's been operating under the radar ever since. I sat down, phone pressed tightly to my ear. And how does he tie to my family? Another pause. Then James added quietly. He's been in contact with your sister for over a year. Financial records, phone calls, emails. They're not just victims, Claire. They're working with him. I didn't speak. I couldn't. Vincent runs these kinds of schemes. James continued, his voice measured. Targets deployed military personnel, people who can't defend their assets in real time. He befriends or manipulates someone close to the target. Then together they drain accounts, sell property, flip homes through cash buyers. Fast, efficient, hard to trace. I closed my eyes. The heat in the room felt suffocating. So Ivy knew, I said finally. My voice came out flat, hollow. She didn't just know, James confirmed. From the looks of it, she initiated part of it. That sentence cut deeper than anything I had heard so far. I don't know why, but A part of me, some naive, desperate part, had clung to the idea that Ivy was being used. That she'd been tricked, pulled into something she didn't fully understand. That when the truth came out, she'd break down in tears, beg for forgiveness. But this was different. This was deliberate. Ivy had reached out to Vincent. She'd planned this, step by step. I leaned back, the weight of it sinking into my bones. I thought of Christmas mornings when we were kids, unwrapping gifts in our pajamas. I thought of the night I held her hand at the hospital when she miscarried. I thought of every shared secret, every whispered promise that we'd always be each other's family no matter what. And now, she was signing my name to documents I never touched. She was standing in my house, pouring wine for a stranger, while I bled for a country half a world away. James's voice broke through the spiral of memory. I also found something else he said. Vincent Blake has done this before. At least 3 other military families, all similar setups, all during deployments. My fingers tightened around the phone. How did no one stop him? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. He's smart, James said. He uses proxies, false names, shell companies. And most victims don't have the resources or the evidence to fight back. They walk away broken. Silent. I let the words hang in the air. Silent. That word. I had lived my entire career by a code of silence. Quiet professionalism. Dignity in the face of adversity. But this wasn't war. This was personal, and I wasn't going to stay silent. I want to bring him down, I said softly. And I want Ivy to see it happen. James exhaled. Then we need to be careful. If we act too soon, they'll disappear. If we wait too long, we won't, I interrupted. I'm not rushing into a firefight. We do this my way, the way I knew best. Strategic, methodical, ruthless. I hung up and sat there for a long time, the desert wind rattling the window pane beside me. Vincent Blake thought he was the predator. He hadn't met me yet. And Ivy, my sister, hadn't yet realized that when you burn the bridge to the only person who ever protected you, there's no one left to pull you out when the fire closes in. 2 months later, I came home under a different name. The military granted me emergency leave without details. James booked everything, flight, motel, rental car, using alternate credentials. No one outside a handful of trusted people knew I was back on American soil. I touched down in Spokane at 3:17 a.m. The sky was still dark, the air colder than I remembered. Every breath felt sharp, foreign, but I kept moving, quiet, controlled. By noon, I was sitting in a rented sedan parked half a block from the house I used to call mine. I barely recognized it. The porch light was different, brighter, newer. There was a wind chime hanging by the front door, something Ivy would have picked out. A black pickup truck sat in the driveway, unfamiliar plates. My dog, my sweet, gentle lab, was lounging on the front step's tail, flicking lazily under the afternoon sun. The sight of him nearly broke me. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, forcing my breath to steady. Emotions were a liability. I couldn't afford them, not yet. For nearly an hour I sat there unmoving, watching as life unfolded without me. Ivy came outside first. She looked different. Not in any obvious way, but I could tell. The way she moved, the way she laughed, too loud, too sharp. She wasn't the sister I remembered. Or maybe she was and I had just refused to see it before. Then he appeared. The man from the security footage. Tall, broad-shouldered. The same man who had sat on my couch, used my coffee mug, walked my dog. I didn't know his name. Not yet. But I knew enough to hate him. They kissed on the porch. Casually, carelessly. Like they had done it 100 times before. I felt something shift inside me, not rage exactly. Not even sadness, just emptiness. A hollow, cold vacancy where trust used to live. Ivy disappeared back inside, leaving the man outside with the dog. He leaned against the truck, pulled out his phone, and laughed at something on the screen. I swallowed hard. The last time I stood on that porch, I was wearing my uniform. Ivy hugged me goodbye. She told me to stay safe. She said she loved me. The memory was sharp, crystalline. I could almost hear her voice, soft and warm. And now I wasn't even a ghost here. I was nothing. I forced myself to look away, blinking back the burn behind my eyes. I reminded myself why I was here. This wasn't about nostalgia. It wasn't about grief. It was about strategy. James's voice echoed in my head. We need evidence. We need timing. Don't rush this. He was right. I wasn't here to make a scene. I was here to build a case. I pulled out my phone and opened the security app. The interior cameras were still feeding live to my private cloud. Every movement, every word, every signature, it was all being captured. I watched as Ivy walked through the living room, wine glass in hand, her laughter echoing through the speakers. She was comfortable, too comfortable. She didn't think I was ever coming back. That I realized was her mistake. The man re-entered the house, and for a moment the front door stood open. I caught a glimpse of the kitchen I had remodeled myself during my last leave. Same cabinets, same backsplash. I picked tile by tile. But it wasn't mine anymore, or so they thought. I exhaled slowly, the cold air burning my throat. I made a mental note of every license plate, every detail, and then I drove away. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. Because I knew something they didn't, I wasn't home to forgive. I was home to finish this. The next morning, I met James at a diner 10 miles outside of town. It was the kind of place that hadn't changed in decades. Peeling linoleum floors, faded booths, the smell of burnt coffee lingering in the air. It felt safe in a way my own house no longer did. James slid into the booth across from me. He looked tired. I probably did too. I've been digging, he began, pulling a folder from his briefcase. And it's worse than we thought. I didn't speak, just waited steady. He opened the folder and pushed it toward me. Inside were names, addresses, case numbers. All military, all familiar. Claire, he said softly, Vincent Blake isn't just running a scam on you. This is a pattern. He's targeted at least 5 other service members, Army, Navy, Air Force. All deployed overseas. All with significant assets at home. I scanned the documents. A Navy lieutenant in Texas. An Army sergeant from Georgia. An Air Force pilot from California. Different branches, different states, same outcome. Accounts drained. Properties sold. Lives dismantled. How long has this been going on? I asked, my voice low. Years, James replied. I cross-checked property transfers, court records, even police reports. Most victims never pressed charges. Some didn't even realize what happened until months after returning. By then the money was long gone. I felt the weight of it settle into my chest. This wasn't personal, it was systemic. How is he getting to them? I asked. How's he choosing who to target? James leaned back, rubbing the bridge of his nose. That's the chilling part. It's not random. He focuses on people with family vulnerabilities, estranged siblings, financial stress, divorces. He identifies the weak links and exploits them. Ivy, Mark. The pieces fit too perfectly. Your case, James continued, is different because you fought back early. Most people, they freeze. They trust the wrong people too long. But you were careful. You set up safeguards. I swallowed hard. Not careful enough. He shook his head. You caught it sooner than anyone else ever did. And because of that, he tapped the folder. We have something to build on. This isn't just a personal betrayal, Claire. This is a federal crime. Wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy. I let that word sink in. Conspiracy. It felt foreign, heavy, but it was the only word that fit. We need to escalate, James said. FBI, Financial Crimes Division. I've already reached out to a contact. They're interested, but they'll need evidence. Real hard evidence. I nodded slowly. We have the surveillance, the bank records, the forged signatures. Good, he said. We'll need more. We need to show this wasn't isolated, that it was premeditated, coordinated. I sat back, the weight of everything pressing into my bones. For a moment, I looked out the window, watched the wind ripple through a line of trees beyond the parking lot. The world kept turning, people kept living, and here I was unraveling the life I thought was mine. Claire, James said quietly, I need to ask, what do you want out of this? Do you want criminal charges, restitution? Do you just want it to stop? I met his eyes. I want the truth exposed, I said calmly. I want them to know they chose the wrong person, and I want every single family they've hurt to know they weren't alone. He nodded once. Then we'll do it right. No shortcuts. I exhaled slowly. No shortcuts. We left the diner an hour later with a plan. I would continue gathering digital evidence, phone logs, camera footage, financial irregularities. James would handle the legal side, preparing to present everything to federal investigators. Timing was everything. We couldn't spook them too soon. As I drove back to the motel, I felt something strange stir inside me. Not rage, not grief, something sharper. Purpose. This wasn't just about me anymore, it was bigger. And for the first time since I opened that email in the desert, I felt the smallest flicker of control returning. Vincent Blake thought he understood how the game worked. He had no idea who he was really dealing with. The thing about betrayal is it rarely comes from strangers. That thought kept circling in my mind as I dug deeper into Vincent Blake's past. I couldn't let it go. Something about his name, his face, the pieces James uncovered it all felt too familiar, like an old wound I couldn't quite place. I spent the next 2 days in that motel lights-dimmed laptop open, going through every public record military database and archived report I could legally access. My fingertips ached from typing. My eyes burned from the screen glare, but I didn't stop. And then I found it, an old deployment roster. Kandahar, 2011. There he was. Vincent J. Blake, logistics coordinator, civilian contractor. Embedded with my unit for 7 months. I felt the breath leave my lungs. I remembered him. Not his face, not clearly, but the name, the presence. He wasn't military, but he acted like he was. Always lingering around supply drops, embedded just close enough to be seen, but never close enough to be trusted. I hadn't spoken to him more than a handful of times. He was forgettable, ordinary, and yet he had been there. The more I read, the colder I felt. Vincent had been quietly discharged from his contracting role after allegations of financial misconduct surfaced. Nothing formal, no prosecution, just gone. I scrolled through archived emails between officers grainy after more than a decade, but one line caught my eye. Recommend early termination of Blake. Pattern of manipulation exploiting troop resources. Keep this quiet. The hairs on my arms stood on end. I sat back, hands trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of realization. This man, this parasite, had been circling military life for years, watching, learning. He knew how deployments worked, how trust operated, how fragile the bonds between family and service could be. And now, a decade later, he'd weaponized that knowledge to destroy lives from the inside out, including mine. But the twist cut deeper than that. I wasn't just another target. I was collateral in a grudge that went back further than I realized. James confirmed it the next morning. I ran his name through old military grievance logs he told me over the phone. Turns out Vincent applied for active duty twice, rejected both times. Behavioral red flags. He blamed the system, filed complaints. His security clearance was revoked. I pressed the phone tighter against my ear. So he's not just running scams, I murmured. He's punishing the institution. James sighed. It looks that way. I sat in silence, memories crashing over me in fragments. Vincent standing by the supply trucks, watching as my unit geared up. Vincent always on the edges of briefings, never quite belonging, but never entirely absent. It all made sense. He hated the military for rejecting him. And he found a way to make us pay without firing a single shot. But what made the knife twist harder was this: Ivy didn't know. She couldn't have. She wasn't part of that world. She didn't see the pattern. She only saw the charm, the promises, the easy money. She thought she was in control. She wasn't. None of them were. I closed my laptop slowly, exhaling through clenched teeth. This wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about a house. It was personal, twisted, surgical. He had taken everything he knew about honor, loyalty, and sacrifice and corrupted it into a weapon. And I wasn't going to let him win. I reached for my notebook, flipping to a clean page. I wrote one sentence: the past is never dead. It isn't even past. The words felt right. I underlined them twice. Then I added watch, wait, strike. I would expose every name, every account, every lie. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every soldier he had hurt, every family he had broken. And I wasn't going to walk away this time. By the time the sun rose the next morning, my decision was made. I wasn't going to confront Ivy. I wasn't going to scream or beg or ask her why. I already knew the answer, or at least the part that mattered. The damage was done. Words wouldn't fix it. This wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about precision. I sat at the small desk in my motel room, the folder James had given me spread open in front of me. Names, numbers, patterns. My life reduced to transactions and betrayals, typed in cold black ink. And yet I felt strangely calm. The first thing I did was disable every shared account that hadn't already been drained. Utilities, insurance, anything with my name tied to hers. Then I pulled my credit report and flagged every line. I called the banks and spoke to fraud departments one by one, each time repeating the same sentence: my identity has been compromised. No further authorizations without my direct consent. They made notes. They issued warnings. I stayed methodical. I knew better than to make impulsive moves. I learned that in war. The next step was securing my military pension. James helped me initiate a freeze on any disbursements, requiring two-step verification for any future withdrawals. Vincent might have taught Ivy how to play games, but this wasn't just any battlefield. This was one I understood better than they ever could. I moved through the list I'd made in Kandahar, one item at a time, no shortcuts, no second-guessing. Watch, wait, strike. By midday, I met James again. We sat in his office, the blinds half closed, his desk cluttered with legal pads and case files. He looked at me carefully, as if searching for the cracks in my armor. "There's still time," he said gently. "If you want to talk to her, try to reach her before this goes further." I shook my head. "No." He studied me for a moment longer before nodding. "Then we proceed." We drafted the formal fraud complaint. We prepared to file notice of property contestation with the county. We gathered every digital record, every signature, every transaction timestamp. James handled the legal pieces. I handled the strategy. What Vincent and Ivy didn't understand, what they couldn't possibly have known, was that in the military, we're trained to lose things: comfort, control, safety. But we are also trained to regain them through discipline, through clarity, through patience. They thought taking everything from me would leave me powerless. They were wrong. They had stripped away the unnecessary. All that was left was focus. The last piece of the trap was the surveillance. I knew the house was still under my control digitally. The cameras I'd installed uploaded automatically to a secure cloud. I didn't need to be inside to see what was happening, so I watched, from my motel room, from the back seat of the rental car, quietly, without emotion. I saw Ivy hosting dinners in the house I bought. I saw the man, Jeremy, I later learned, wearing my sweatshirt, sleeping in my bed, walking my dog. Each image settled over me like another layer of ice. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad anymore. I was ready. James coordinated with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. He told me they were interested. Very interested. Vincent Blake's name was already on their radar for other cross-state financial schemes. Our case might be the missing link. We just needed one more thing: proof of intent. That's when I knew it was time to bait the hook. I sent Ivy a text. Neutral. Unemotional. 3 words. "We need closure." I knew she'd take the bait. She'd want to meet, to control the narrative, to explain, or to manipulate. Either way, it would set the wheels in motion. And when she walked into that meeting, when she sat down across from me thinking she still held the cards, she wouldn't know that the trap was already locked, that every move had already been made, that by the time she realized what I'd done, it would already be too late. I didn't have to wait long. The morning after I sent the message, Ivy responded. "Let's meet. Riverfront Park, noon." The words were carefully chosen. Neutral, almost polite, but I could hear the undertone. Control. She still believed she held it. She still thought I could be handled, like she could talk her way out of what was coming. But I didn't show up. Instead, I sat in my rental car across from my house eyes on the live security feed, streaming through my phone. At precisely 11:47 a.m., Ivy left the house. I watched her get into her silver SUV and drive toward the park, toward a meeting that would never happen. She had taken the bait without hesitation. And that was exactly what I needed. 20 minutes later, another car pulled into the driveway. I recognized it immediately from the surveillance, the same real estate agent's vehicle I'd seen in earlier footage. The door opened and out stepped a man I didn't know, Daniel Spencer. The agent. Jeremy was already outside waiting. They shook hands casually. Both men smiled. I zoomed the camera feed in with my thumb. My heart beat steady, unflinching. They talked for a few minutes on the porch. I couldn't hear their words, but I didn't need to. Their body language told me everything. This was routine. This wasn't the first time they had done this. And then confirmation. Jeremy led Spencer inside. I tapped the interior camera feed. The living room flickered to life. I saw them step through the front door, their figures clear despite the low lighting. Jeremy gestured around the space, pointing at the kitchen, the fireplace, the back windows, just like any other house showing. I turned up the audio. Should list by the end of the week, Spencer was saying. Got a buyer lined up already. Cash offer, no inspections. We'll close fast. Jeremy laughed. Perfect. How much are we looking at? List at $470K. They'll come in around $420K. Standard play. I felt the familiar coldness wash over me. It wasn't just theft. It was practiced, polished. This was a system, and they'd done it before. I listened as Spencer made a passing joke about military types being too distracted to notice what happened back home. Jeremy laughed harder than necessary. For a moment, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I felt vindication. Because every word, every smug, careless word was being recorded, streamed, and saved. I forwarded the footage directly to James and to the FBI agent handling the case. One short message happening now. I kept the camera rolling. I watched Spencer pull out his tablet, snapping photos of the interior. Jeremy followed, pointing out small features as if the house belonged to him. It didn't. Not legally, not morally. I sat perfectly still. Hands folded in my lap as the final piece of the trap slid into place. They had no idea. No idea they were being watched. No idea the evidence they were providing in real time. No idea that the person they thought they'd destroyed was sitting less than half a mile away, steady as stone, as their entire scheme unraveled. By the time Ivy returned to an empty park, no doubt confused, no doubt already texting me, I was already sending the footage to Agent Patel. The case was no longer just mine. It was federal. I leaned back against the seat and closed my eyes. The war wasn't over, not yet, but the tide had finally turned. I didn't need to be close to see how it ended. I parked 2 blocks away, far enough to remain invisible, close enough to watch the quiet end to the storm they had created. The FBI agents arrived just before noon, 2 black SUVs, clean and unmarked, with the kind of calm efficiency you only notice when you know what to look for. I sat perfectly still, hands resting on my knees as the scene unfolded in absolute silence. Jeremy was the first one let out. He looked confused at first, then angry. He barked something at the nearest agent, his hands raised in the universal gesture of denial. The click of the cuffs echoed in my mind, even though I couldn't hear them from where I sat. Next came Spencer, the real estate agent. He didn't fight. He didn't speak. He just lowered his head and let them walk him to the second vehicle, his body slack with resignation. I knew that look. I'd seen it on battlefields. The exact moment someone realizes the war is over and they've lost. But it wasn't until I saw Ivy that the breath caught in my throat. She stepped outside slowly, her expression vacant, hollow. She wasn't in handcuffs, at least not yet. But 2 agents flanked her, guiding her toward one of the SUVs. She was still in the clothes I remembered: jeans, a simple sweater, hair pulled back the way she always wore it on lazy mornings. I felt something twist deep inside me. Ivy. The sister I once trusted with everything. I thought I would feel satisfaction, vindication, some sense of triumph. But all I felt was cold. James had offered to let me stay at his office or even at the FBI field station if I wanted updates in real time. I declined. I needed distance. I needed to see it from the outside to keep myself anchored. Because this wasn't just about legal victories. This was about what came after. I watched until the last agent closed the door, until the last vehicle pulled away, until the street was quiet again, like nothing had ever happened. And then I noticed her. At the edge of the sidewalk near the old oak tree that lined the street, I saw my mother. She wasn't part of the chaos. She wasn't being questioned. She was just standing there, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her eyes fixed on the house. I froze. I hadn't expected to see her. And then, as if sensing me somehow, she turned her head just slightly and looked in the direction of my car. She couldn't have seen me. The distance was too far, the glare too strong. But something in her face changed. Not surprise, not confusion. Resignation, like she knew. I sat there, pulse steady, but heart sinking as memory after memory flickered through my mind, the distance in her voice, months before the polite but hollow hugs, the one time only once she asked about my pension. I felt the truth land heavy and unflinching. She knew, maybe not every detail, maybe not the full extent of what Ivy and Mark were doing, but she knew something, and she said nothing. I closed my eyes, the air thick in my lungs. The betrayal wasn't just Ivy's, it ran deeper, it ran through blood. I watched as my mother slowly turned away, walking back toward her car without a word, her shoulders stooped, her steps heavy. I didn't follow, I didn't call out. Some wars end without confrontation, some endings don't need words. I let her go. The street emptied, the wind shifted, and I sat there quietly as the dust of the life I used to have settled into silence. The call came that evening, just as the last of the light faded beyond the motel window. Agent Patel's voice was calm, but clear. "We have them," she said. "Charges are being filed. Vincent Blake, Jeremy Ryan, Daniel Spencer, and your sister. Mark's in custody too." I closed my eyes for a moment, exhaling slowly. "What happens now?" "They'll face a range of charges," she explained. "Wire fraud, conspiracy, identity theft, financial crimes across state lines. It's bigger than we thought." "Your case gave us the final piece we needed." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Thank you." There was a brief pause before she added softly, "Not many people could have stayed this calm, Ms. Lawson. Most victims, they either collapse or walk away, but you saw it through." Her words lingered long after I hung up. I should have felt victorious. I should have felt relief. But sitting there in that dimly lit motel room, all I felt was quiet. Because the truth was, I hadn't won anything. The house gone, the family broken beyond repair, the life I thought I'd return to. It didn't exist anymore. All that remained were pieces scattered sharp and unrecognizable. And yet, there was something else too. A small flicker of peace. I had done what I came to do. I had finished it. The next morning, James met me for coffee. We sat outside, the wind crisped, the city still waking. He slid an envelope across the table, documents confirming the fraud proceedings. Property seizure notices, restitution orders. "It's official," he said. "The house is yours again. Legally, clean title, no claims." I traced my fingers over the edge of the envelope. "Doesn't feel like mine anymore." James gave a small nod. He understood. "Your sister." He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "She made a statement. Claimed she was manipulated, pressured, said she never meant for it to go this far." I looked away toward the passing cars. "She made choices." "Yeah," he said quietly. "She did." Neither of us spoke for a while. Before we parted, he reached into his coat pocket and handed me something small, a silver pin. A miniature set of wings, the kind issued on completion of initial flight school long ago. "I found this in the box you left in storage," he said. "Thought you might want it back." I turned the pin over in my hand. The metal was worn smooth, the edges dulled by time, but the weight of it, that hadn't changed. "Thank you," I murmured. I drove past the house one last time that afternoon. It looked the same, neat lawn, fresh paint. The curtains Ivy had picked still hung in the front window, but to me it was just a structure, brick and wood and glass. The heart of it, what it once meant, was gone. I didn't stop, didn't slow down, I kept driving. The road stretched ahead, open, empty, waiting. Some battles end not with fireworks, but with a whisper. A choice to move forward, a decision to let go, not because you forget, but because you refuse to let betrayal define you. That was my war. And I had survived it. The letter came 2 weeks after the arrests. It was thin, handwritten on plain-lined paper. The kind of letter you only write when the walls have closed in and the silence becomes unbearable. The return address told me everything I needed to know: the county detention center. Ivy. I sat at the small kitchen table of my rental, fingers tracing the edges before I unfolded it. The handwriting was hers, neat, careful, almost childlike in its symmetry. "Claire," it began. No dear, no warmth. Just my name. The letter wasn't long. She told me she never meant for things to spiral the way they had. That she was scared. That she felt abandoned when I left for each deployment. That Vincent had offered her stability, answers to questions she didn't even know she was asking. She blamed stress, loneliness, a need to feel seen. But one sentence stuck out from the rest. "You chose your career," she wrote. "I chose family." I read that line over and over, the words blurring into one another. I chose my career, she chose family. The accusation was subtle, but it was there. I set the letter down and stared at it in silence. For a long time I tried to figure out how to feel about it. Should I be angry? Should I pity her? Should I let the memories of who she used to be outweigh what she had done? But in the end I did none of those things. I folded the letter back up, slid it into a drawer, and I didn't reply. Because some words don't deserve answers. And some betrayals are too deep for letters to mend. That night I lay awake for hours, the letter still sitting unopened in the drawer. And without meaning to, my mind drifted back to the first time I ever put on a uniform. I was 21, newly commissioned, nervous, excited, terrified, all at once. I remembered the weight of the fabric, the way the seams itched against my skin, the way the mirror reflected not just the clothes, but the person I was about to become. I stood there for almost an hour, too overwhelmed to move. Ivy was there that day. She sat on the edge of my bed, swinging her legs, her eyes wide, with something close to admiration. "You look different," she had whispered. "Stronger." I smiled at the memory because I could still hear her voice so clearly. The softness of it, the awe. Somewhere along the way that admiration had soured into resentment. Somewhere along the way my victories had become her absence. My service had become her sacrifice to a price she never agreed to pay. And yet I would do it all again. I would still choose the path I chose, the duty, the uniform, the values etched into every decision I made since that day. Because for all the broken pieces, for all the betrayal and loss, the uniform had given me something no one could take away. The knowledge of who I truly was. I wasn't the person they saw in their stories. I wasn't the failure they whispered about. I was still standing. And sometimes that was enough. I turned off the lamp, the room slipping into darkness, the hum of the night soft against the window pane. Some wounds don't heal the way you want them to. But survival, I'd learned, isn't always about erasing the scars. Sometimes it's just about carrying them quietly, steadily, and walking forward anyway. Some people think healing happens all at once. Like there's a moment, a sunrise, a letter, a phone call, where the weight finally lifts and everything broken quietly stitches itself back together. That wasn't how it happened for me. A year after the arrests, I sold the house. I didn't keep a single key. I didn't take the curtains or the dishes or the photographs tucked into the back of old drawers. I let it all go, every physical reminder of what was and what had been taken from me. Instead, I bought a cabin in Wyoming. 2 bedrooms, 10 acres of land. A winding creek at the back edge of the property. No neighbors for miles. The first night I slept there, it was so quiet. I could hear the wind move through the pines like a living thing. And for the first time in years, I slept without dreaming of sand or gunfire or betrayal. I adopted a dog, a German shepherd, named Scout. He's lean, fast, sharp-eyed. The kind of loyal that doesn't need words. We fall into rhythm easily, early morning walks, long hours in the workshop, evenings by the fire. I became a carpenter, nothing fancy. Tables, chairs, hand-carved boxes. I taught myself slowly, hands raw at first, movements clumsy, but over time the work steadied me. There's something about wood, the way it resists, the way it yields, the way it carries its own story in every knot and grain. It reminded me of survival, of the scars you carry and the beauty you can still create around them. I don't talk about Ivy much, not because I hate her, not because I forgive her, but because some chapters end and there's no use rereading them. Last I heard, she moved to Oregon after serving her sentence. Mark II. I don't follow, I don't check. Whatever roads they walk from here are no longer mine to cross, but every now and then, unexpectedly, a letter finds its way to my mailbox. It's never from Ivy, never from anyone I know. It's from strangers, military spouses, soldiers, veterans, people who heard my story in passing through the legal channels, through the slow-moving gossip of small-town newspapers. They write to say, thank you. One letter from a woman in Texas stays with me most. Her husband had been targeted the same way I had, same scam, same manipulation. She wrote that when the arrests happened, when the story broke, she realized she wasn't alone. She took action in time, saved her home, saved her family. You don't know me, she wrote, but you saved us. Thank you for fighting back. I read that letter twice the day it came. Then I pinned it to the fridge. Not because I need reminders of what happened, but because sometimes on the quiet days when the cabin is still, when the snow presses against the windows, it helps to remember that even the worst endings can leave behind something good. A footprint, a handprint, a spark. I still carry the scars. I won't pretend I don't. There are moments when I think of Ivy's face before everything unraveled, and I feel the dull ache of something that once was but can never be again. There are moments when I wake before dawn, heart pounding, breath tight, as if the past has crawled through the walls, but they pass. I let them pass. Because in the end, survival isn't about erasing pain. It's about carrying it well. Scout shifts beside me now, his ears twitching as the fire crackles low. The wind moves outside like it always does. Steady, endless. I press my hand to the scar along my wrist, the faint white line from a roadside blast in Kandahar years before. The scar is smooth now, faded. But it's still there. Just like me, I'm still here. And that quietly, steadily is enough. If there's one thing I've learned from everything that happened, it's this. No one can steal your dignity unless you hand it to them. Betrayal cuts deep. It leaves scars that don't always fade. Sometimes it comes from strangers. Sometimes heartbreakingly it comes from the people you once loved most. But in the end, the choice of who you become after the choice of what you carry forward belongs to you. It belonged to me. For a long time, I believed that strength meant silence. That resilience meant bearing the hurt, pushing forward without looking back. But that's not true. Real strength, the kind that lasts, is quiet. It's in the way you choose to rebuild, the way you choose to heal, the way you decide over and over again that you will not be defined by the worst thing that happened to you. I didn't win by shouting louder. I didn't win by seeking revenge for the sake of destruction. I won by standing still when the ground shook beneath me, by holding the line when everything I knew collapsed, by remembering who I was when others tried to rewrite the story for me. And that's what I want to tell you, whoever you are, wherever you are. If you've been betrayed, if you've been lied to, discarded, used, or forgotten, you are still worthy. You are still whole. Your worth isn't measured by what they took from you. It's measured by what you refuse to let them take. There will be days when the memory stings. There will be moments when the weight feels unbearable, but I promise you this, you can survive it. You can outlast it. You can come out the other side, not as the person you were before, but as someone braver, wiser, and stronger than you ever imagined. Sometimes the people you trusted will fail you. Sometimes life will break in ways you never thought possible. But even then, especially then, you have the right to rise, to heal, to begin again. And when you do, when you take that first step forward, however small, you'll realize something powerful. They never really broke you. They never truly won. Because you're still here, and that's everything. Before we say goodbye, I'd love to ask you something. Where are you watching from? Is it a quiet morning sunlight spilling through your window? A warm cup of coffee in your hands? Or maybe it's late, one of those nights where stories like this find you when you need them most. Wherever you are, I invite you to share in the comments. We read every word with gratitude. And if this story touched something in you, if it reminded you of your own strength, your own resilience, I hope you'll consider subscribing to this channel. Not just to hear more stories like this, but to be part of a community that still believes in kindness, in healing, in the quiet miracle of second chances. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Wherever this moment finds you, I hope you carry this story with you, and remember, sometimes the miracle doesn't knock on your door. Sometimes it waits patiently, quietly, until you're ready to open your heart again. Take care, and we'll see you in the next story.